Good morning, podcasters. Today is Monday, May 11, 2026, and this morning we're kicking off another obsession-worthy podcast conversation. I'm going to be hosting today with Jonathan Howard, and Jonathan is bringing us a fun one, an episode from 99% Invisible called the Roman Mars Mazda Virus. And the setup is wonderfully strange. A podcast listener can play almost anything in his car, but when he tries to play 99% Invisible, his Mazda stereo locks up. So today we're going to talk about why this episode works, how a tiny, oddly specific tech problem becomes a full-blown audio mystery, and what podcasters can learn from the storytelling choices, the pacing, the humor, the curiosity, and the collaboration between 99% Invisible and Reply All. We'll also talk about why this is a obsession-worthy podcast.
The Podcasting Morning Chat is powered by Ironic Media, helping podcasters launch, polish, and grow great shows. And by Content Creators Accountant, helping creators build real business behind their content.
Well, good morning, everyone. And you see that Mark is not joining us today. Mark is back in traveling from seeing his stepson's graduation. So he had a late night. So he asked me to jump in and fill in for him this morning. So that is what I'm doing. In addition to that, joining me on stage here are Jonathan Howard, D.R. Fay, Janaid, Sid Meadows, and BC Babbles. So we have a great one today, Jonathan, with this obsession-worthy podcast, 99% Invisible, called the Roman Mars Mazda Virus. Now, before we get started, just want to remind everybody, if you would like to have your show featured on the Podcasting Morning Show, absolutely free. All you've got to do is go to podcastingmorningshow.com/spotlight. Once you go to that website, again, that's podcastingmorningshow.com/spotlight. Just follow the directions there because we'd love to feature your show on our show and give it a wider audience so people can check it out. So
have we gotten any submissions?
We have. We've gotten a couple of them. So we're still waiting for a few more to get it lined up, but we've gotten a few. I would encourage everybody to go to the website and do that. Listen, this is a great way to give yourself some exposure. We're not asking for anything in return. Just tell us about your show. Just 60 seconds. It can be we got one video and we got one audio, which is even cool. So yeah, whatever you can do, just send it to us. Tell us about your show, who your audience is and what they would gain from your show. But let's jump right into it, Jonathan. I'm going to turn over the reins to you, my friend.
All right. Well, you highlighted that there's a lot to go over in this episode. So let's start talking a little bit about it. It was definitely, excuse me, now my voice isn't working. A really interesting episode, and there was a lot of things happening. So it's a crossover episode of 99% Invisible and Reply All. 99% Invisible is a podcast about unnoticed architecture and the design of everyday life. It explores all the hidden systems, decisions, objects, sounds, symbols, infrastructure, which is what it really explored in this one, and design choices that quietly shape human behavior without most of us realizing it. And this particular episode, a man discovers his Mazda stereo crashes every time he plays one specific podcast, and that's 99% Invisible. Not Spotify, not podcasts in general, only Roman Mars. So apparently Mazda has a problem with Roman Mars. But what begins as a tiny tech issue becomes a real full investigative mystery about systems and software bugs and the weird fragility of modern technology, because this was a weird one. And actually, before I go further, I want to remind everybody why we do obsession-worthy podcasts. And that is because we really like to dig into these podcasts and see what we can learn from them so we can make our podcast better. We may not be creating a podcast on radio bugs, but we can use the storytelling and all the things that happen in this to help make our podcast a little bit better. All right. So this episode combines mystery storytelling, investigative journalism, comedy, collaboration, and live experimentation. But what's really important is it actually makes the whole process of discovering what is causing this problem the entertainment, which is something that is important for us to take away. And A quick note before we jump into the clips. This is also a collaboration. And I want to remind people that collaborations are a great opportunity for your podcast whenever you can do them. But a good collaboration should be equally beneficial for you and the person you're collaborating with. Your audiences should be adjacent, and a collab done right will double your audience for the specific episode, allowing you to grow your own individual audience with people that are from the other podcast audience that may have never heard you. So whenever that's an opportunity and it makes sense for you, take that opportunity. All right. So clip 1, and there's a lot of clips today. I apologize, guys. There are a lot of clips today. But clip 1 does something really, really well. Within seconds, we understand the problem, the stakes, the absurdity, and the whole mystery behind this podcast. And this is in like 30 seconds right up at the top. So you can hit that first one.
So Ben, not too long ago, got a new car. It was a 2016 Mazda 6. And the thing that he was most excited about in his new car was that he could pair his phone using Bluetooth so that he could listen to podcasts.
Oh, before he was like an aux-in guy?
Yes. Anyway, for some reason, the radio in his new car refuses to play one podcast and one podcast only.
Which is?
The Radiotopia podcast, 99% Invisible.
Really?
Yes. And it's driving him absolutely insane.
His car Bluetooth has rejected Roman Mars and his stories?
Yes.
So there you go. His car Bluetooth has rejected Roman Mars' stories. So that line alone reframes this entire episode. It's not a boring tech issue anymore. It's more a personal and emotional thing. The specificity is what creates the stickiness here. It's one podcast, one car, and a really bizarre issue. But specificity is what makes things memorable. Vagueness ends up killing your podcast. So
yeah, this certainly wasn't vague from the beginning, actually. As I was listening to this, I was out doing my morning walk on the farm, and I'm thinking, I can understand how frustrating this would be, because I've had tech issues like that before. And it's one of those things where I paid for this tech. I just want it to work. How come everything works except for this? And I got to be honest with you, Jonathan, we haven't gotten into a lot of it, but this episode kind of annoyed me a little bit, because I just wanted to find out, okay, what is the fix here? How are we going to solve this problem? I kept on saying, oh, come on, guys, try this. Come on, guys, try that, which is brilliant on their part, because now I am an active participant in this craziness that turns into this podcast. I don't want to take away all your shine, Jonathan, but that was the thing. It really sucked me in from the beginning, because I was like, oh man, I got to hear how this ends. Like, there's no way I'm turning this off. In fact, I walked like an extra mile because I wanted to finish it while I was out walking.
Yeah, and I made a note actually a little bit later that I knew people were going to be very frustrated with the build, because some people just want to know how to fix it. But the build is really important because it does actually get you invested. But we've talked many times about the importance of the curiosity gap or a loop. And that's what this episode really does. It keeps opening new loops. Why was it only this podcast? Why is it only Mazda? Could audio actually break software in a car? Of course, is Roman Mars cursed? And is this happening to other people? But each answer creates a deeper mystery, and that creates the bingeable storytelling. That's exactly what Ralph was talking about. It gets you to keep going because you want to find out. You're invested now. You want to find out the answer.
I think DR wanted to make a comment. Go ahead, DR.
Yeah, I have a question. So we're talking about Roman Mars. He is the host of 99%. No. Yes, he is?
Yes.
Okay. So for people who have never listened to 99%, what is the rest of the? Invisible. Okay. Roman Mars is the host of that show. And at some point they start talking about, well, maybe it's the way the host talks. Maybe it's the sound of his voice. So I just wanted to make it clear that he's the host of this show, Roman Mars. Okay.
Yes. However, the people that you hear talking are actually not Roman Mars because, like I said, it's a crossover episode.
Right.
And in most of the clips, you're actually hearing the hosts of the other podcast, which is now randomly escaping my mind.
Jonathan, while we're talking about crossover, in case somebody doesn't know what it means by crossover, what exactly does that mean?
It is when two podcasts are, they work on a collaborative episode. They might be hosting, the other person's podcast or being a part of the other person's podcast, but it's really a collaborative effort between the podcasts. Did that?
Oh, no, I totally get it. I mean, I see that on television. I know I like to watch Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, Chicago PD, and they have these crossover episodes. Actually, I think that's a pretty good idea, isn't it? A way to build your audience potentially. If you can find some crossover audiences, it's probably a very brilliant way to build some audience.
Yeah, I saw absolutely. Alex's little pepper come up.
Go ahead, Alex.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Yeah, we used to do a lot of crossover episodes with podcasts that do the same show. We would do either before the season started and after the end, we'd get a couple of other podcasts together and we would do one show, drop it as one show on all of our platforms or something similar to that. And you, like you said, it's a great way to kind of get your ears to a new your voice to new listeners, and we love doing it. Plus, when you're dealing with what we're dealing with, we have a certain take, and it's nice to hear other people's takes on the same topic.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for sharing that. Go ahead, Jonathan. You want to move on to the next topic?
Sure. If there's nothing else, we can talk about the second clip, which the second clip is really just providing proof that this is actually happening. And it does an excellent job highlighting the issue and providing the proof that's needed so that they can actually start running this test.
The show does start playing, but like the display screen stops working, it totally freezes, the buttons aren't working properly, he has no control, it's just playing on its own.
The Hall of Honor is displayed.
So you can't interact with the screen at all. It still says whatever I played right before 99% invisible.
And then after about a minute,
over. What she saw was
a
massive
the screen just went black.
Only 18 feet wide.
And now it's cut off and restarted. And I'm not playing 99% invisible anymore because every time I've done that, if it's still playing, it will freeze again.
How could you have a tech problem where the trigger was like content?
I know, it's weird, right?
It's very weird. It's like it.
So his car Bluetooth has rejected Roman Mars. That's not completely. And this tech problem is now part of the content. So that sentence changes the scale of the mystery. The host understands something important. The audience is no longer invested in the stereo itself. They're actually interested in how this actually exists. And the problem that now becomes almost philosophical. How is this actually happening? So we now have a clear and proven dilemma, but the mystery is how are we going to solve this mystery? And that is really what clip 3 starts to dive into. Now, what follows are some insane podcast experiments where they see if they can isolate the problem. Not one, not two, but several. So I forgot to stop and see if anybody had any questions. I'm just running through these.
Well, this is where the frustration started to build, Jonathan. At this very point, I'm thinking, okay, guys, because I'm a solver, like I'm a problem solver. So immediately in my mind, I go, okay, well, clearly it has to do with something in the title of his episode or something he's doing. So guys, go do this, this, and this. And I think the next clip is going to take us there. But that's where the frustration started for me.
Yeah. And I'm sure for you as a solver, the fact that they actually created all of these podcasts to test things, not just change the title and submit something. They actually created all of these different podcasts for this. I'm sure infuriated you.
Well, no, actually, it actually didn't infuriate me because I used to work for a software company, And one of the things we had to do, I worked in what we called tech support. I had to help the programmers fix this stuff by recreating it. And I would spend days, Jonathan, creating these scenarios of let's put all these things in the same order. And yeah, it got frustrating, but it was so cool. Like when you figured it out, oh, here's what it was. Some little stupid button or some little checkbox. So yeah, it did build frustration, but my mind started to play like, okay, well, here's what they're going to do. They're going to recreate this. They're going to do this, this, and this. I was frustrated by how they did it, but it took me right there.
Right. And they begin to build all these fake podcasts, which turns the investigation into entertainment because they were really actually interesting podcasts.
And
So
I
you can hit
mean,
that third
with
one.
theme music and intros and everything, like a
And cover art.
real cover art, like a real podcast, just for all of these experiments.
They definitely took it to the extreme, didn't they, DR? Jimmy, go ahead and play the third clip, Jonathan.
Go ahead. You can hit that third clip. Yeah.
Hey, real quick
Well,
before you do that,
let's just start at the beginning.
Yvonne,
Okay.
So the first podcast we made is called Carrot Space Carrot. You know the carrot, which is
Carrot,
above the six.
the little pointy upwards arrow.
Yeah.
Okay, it's called Carrot Space Carrot.
I'm just gonna play it for you.
Okay. Oh God, we are in Alex Coleman territory. That's synth.
Hello, welcome to the Carrot Space Carrot podcast. I recorded this in my attic. Queen Anne's lace annihilates negative Queen Anne's lace.
I think I've had enough of this podcast.
Okay. So we made this podcast. We uploaded it to podcast apps and to an RSS feed.
Uh-huh.
We gave it to Ben.
Uh-huh.
And I asked him to try it in his car. Go ahead and listen. And we'll see if it breaks your car stereo.
Sid had something I think he wanted to say.
Sorry about that, Sid. I
Before
didn't
we
mean to
hit that
cut you
clip.
off with that clip. Go ahead, Sid.
yeah, no worries. Yvonne's raised her hand, and I'm trying to bring her up, and it's not working. Can somebody else try? Or maybe Yvonne, you
I
may have
tried
to
to bring
leave the
her up
room
as
and
well,
come back.
Sid. I tried to bring
Okay.
her up as well, and it's not working.
Yeah, she said she's doing
Okay.
a few things in the background right now. We'll try to join the conversation later. So let's go ahead and continue.
She might
on,
be
Jonathan.
sitting in the Mazda. I don't know.
She said she didn't mean to raise her hand. So go ahead, Jonathan. Let's keep rolling.
All right. So, hello and welcome to the Carrot Space Carrot podcast. The audience really does get rewarded with the novelty as the mystery deepens. And this keeps a really highly technical episode from becoming dry because you get the host kind of acting like these curious idiots in the best possible way. And the energy that they're putting into this becomes contagious. Because every theory gets tested live, and that matters because the show doesn't just say, hey, we have this thing, it used to be an issue, but now, hey, we figured it out. It actually proves through the action of creating these podcasts that it's doing the work, it's stepping through it, and that matters because you're hearing the experiments, the failed attempts, the recreated conditions, all the live reactions. And this is receipt-based storytelling, and that's what creates trust in your podcast.
But that was the very thing that frustrated me, Jonathan, because I said, just create another one with the same name. What is the big deal here? Put the same name, 99% invisible, space, something, and let's just do that. So I got to be honest. As I'm out walking, I'm going, dudes, let's just make this simple. Let's cut to the chase. Like before they even let that out of the bag as this could be an issue, I'm thinking, why don't you just do that?
Because they're creatives.
And
it wouldn't be a good podcast episode. Go ahead, DR.
And they even mentioned that when they finally did do that, the other person he's talking to said, well, you should have done this from the very beginning.
Oops.
But it did build the tension, Jonathan. And if that was the goal, then I give them an A+ for effort in building tension because it made me stressed out.
Yeah. And, as we get to this point, now, as we're going into clip 4, it seems like all the logical explanations have failed, which is, again, that escalation that keeps the listener locked in because we've invested in this point. And I know, we've listened to 30-second clips here, but this is about 20 minutes into the episode.
Mm-hmm.
So this escalation keeps us locked in. And now we've invested all this time. We need to know what's happening. So let's hit on clip 4.
So Roman's whole theory that he found so obvious does not seem to be founded.
It doesn't seem to be founded. And so at this point, I just start thinking that it has to be something within the file itself that they are uploading that's busted. That it doesn't actually have anything to do with the percent sign.
Interesting.
But then Ben tells us something that, again, befuddles us.
Okay.
Which is, Ben found a copy of a 99% Invisible episode on YouTube and tried playing that over his car stereo.
So he was like, I'm going to see if pirated 99PI works?
Yeah.
And?
It breaks the car.
It breaks the car?
I mean, it breaks the stereo.
It does the same thing.
Yeah.
Which is weird because it just means like it's not actually anything about the file itself. Because when someone's uploading a podcast to YouTube, that's like a totally new file.
Yes.
It's like the...
Now we're frustrated. Now we're really frustrated. Because every time they think they solved it, something else breaks, which creates the momentum in the story. But the audience is thinking, okay, what is really going on here? And maybe, since I normally do 5 clips, we can actually see what's going on in this next clip.
Jonathan, before we go there, I just want to point something out. A brilliant use of music here. Because when they started this clip, that music got me more stressed out than I was before I started hearing it. Because then I'm playing it, and I'm hearing this thing like, oh, it's sucking me in, right? So I think we can all take away from that. If you've got a moment like that in your content, that was a brilliant use of sound, what we call soundscape, to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And the music can build the tension as well. As we approach, hopefully, what might be a breakthrough moment. Because we're 35 minutes in now. We got to figure this out. So, do we finally uncover the tiny invisible system behind this whole story in this clip? Let's find out.
Kurt says, I have a theory. And the theory is that in the programming language C.
Oh, I know what it is. I know what happened. Literally 99% means something. It means turn off your stereo in the programming language C.
You're close, but not exactly. In the programming language C, basically in some scenarios, the percent sign means, hey, the character immediately following me, the character immediately following the percent sign, think about that like code rather than like text.
Oh.
And start parsing that as though it's asking you to run commands.
Yeah. So we don't quite get to that resolution yet, but we think we're a lot closer. So the programming language C, it must be to blame. And that's a complicated answer. So the host kind of frames it emotionally instead of technically. The audience doesn't need to understand programming language C or C++ or whatever. They just need to understand that there's this weird symbol that broke everything. So that's where we are. But is C actually to blame? So the episode reveals the answer is still wrong. And this is where it truly becomes a masterclass in escalation. Something that would frustrate some listeners. I get it. I want to hit that 6th clip. There's a lot of clips in this one, and I got some stuff to talk about. But if anybody has anything before we jump into it.
So our operating theory was that %I was breaking the radio because the percent sign followed by the letter I meant something in the programming language C. But what Brandon told us was, no, that program wasn't even written in C. It was written in a totally different programming language.
Okay.
And what Brandon thinks the problem is that the code should tell the radio to ignore things that it doesn't understand or that don't mean anything. But in this case, for whatever reason, it's not. So the radio sees %I and just keeps desperately trying to figure out what it means.
So it's like it's having a panic attack.
Kind of.
It's like percent I.
Brilliant. way of describing it, because that's exactly what I felt like. Like I was like, okay, if this is going to do this, why is this happening? Why? So, that built energy, that push really, really drove this clip and us towards the end of the episode, where we do actually get a resolution. But before we do that, how I did have a question really about how you can create your own tension in your own podcast. Like, how could you as a creator create some tension in your podcast that's not going to make people go crazy, but is going to keep them interested in what you're offering?
I got to admit, Jonathan, that sometimes it's very hard for me to figure out how this relates to the podcasts that I work on as a producer. For instance, the podcast with my client, who is the 7-figure business coach, or the client who is the holistically healthy coach. So I'm trying to figure out how tension can be in those podcasts. They interview other people. So I don't know. I'm coming to you for help.
Yeah, well, and I love this question, because it's something that, when you're interviewing people, if you plan out an interview, if they plan out an interview, it's not going to be yours, that really touches on a problem that their audience is having. And this person is going to help them solve that problem. You can start with really like pushing on that problem a little bit, creating that tension where you're talking about the problem that they're facing and why it's so frustrating and how come it's stopping them from making progress or anything along those lines. And then you can start to build in some quick first steps, a quick solution that's going to help them move to the next level. And when you build it and you actually don't fully answer the question, you don't fully solve the problem until the end of the podcast, that's creating tension. That's actually getting them into that curiosity loop where they feel like the podcast is about them and it matters and they want to find the answer out. So they stick around.
And there's some intentionality in that, Jonathan, I think is what you're really saying. And that is when you're thinking about putting your episode together, even if you've already done the interview, you can still go back and build these tension points in, because you can go back and think through it. It doesn't have to be just this long, I'm just going to hit play and let it go. This is where you can build in and cut some things up to really build that tension into that episode, DR. So that might help you, DR, if you think intentionally, what are some cliffhangers that I can grab this little piece from over here and move it over here? And it becomes a sequencing thing. The audience doesn't even realize that you did that, but they get the benefit of the takeaway from that.
Right. Maybe it could be a hybrid of an interview show and narrative. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Maybe kind of marry them a little bit.
And whenever you have storytelling, that's built-in tension. So even if the guest has a really strong story to tell, you can use that to build the tension and get people interested as well. So having them tell a story, connecting with it, making sure it lands the point that you want to get across. But the one thing I would say with that, and I say this about a lot of the podcasts we actually look at, you have to start with a purpose, with a statement of what people are going to get out of that podcast, so that you're then building towards that.
I just wanted to interrupt for 1 second and just give everybody a preview of tomorrow's show. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to have Cindy Harrison, who is a publicist. So make sure you join us tomorrow at 8 a.m. She's going to talk to you about how publicity can work for your podcast. That'll be tomorrow at 8 a.m. Again, her name is Cindy Harrison. So make sure you join us tomorrow if you're interested in publicity, or even, hey, about this one, identity protection as you're starting to build an audience. She's going to have a great episode about that. So that's what we're going to talk about on tomorrow's show.
Cool.
All right. Very cool. Thank you Ralph and DR, does anybody else have, a question about how they could build tension in their own podcast before we move on to the next clip? All right. So we're getting to the payoff here. It's small, weird, and incredibly satisfying. But what's really important is it feels human. After listening to all this, we're finally reaching that point where it feels human and it's not this nagging thing in the back of our heads anymore. So you can hit that next one.
Jonathan, is this 6 or 7? I've lost track.
You know what? I think I might have jumped a clip. I did jump a clip. Sorry. So it wasn't C to blame. But we're going to get this masterclass and escalation. This is clip 6, I think.
6? Sounds good.
Yeah.
So our operating theory was that %I was breaking the radio because the % sign followed by the letter I meant something in the programming language C. But what Brandon told us was, no, that program wasn't even written in C. It was written in a totally different programming language.
Okay.
And what Brandon thinks the problem is that the code should tell the radio to ignore things that it doesn't understand or that don't mean anything. But in this case, for whatever reason, it's not. So the radio sees %I and just keeps desperately trying to figure out what it means.
So it's like it's having a panic attack.
Kind of.
It's like I percent I.
Let's hit number 7.
Sorry about that. I think we got out of sequence together. We'll go right to number 7. Thank you, Jonathan.
Andrew Kuklowitz from PRX had a very sweet idea.
Maybe we got to publish a version of 99% Invisible with some slightly different titles or something. I'd be willing to create the Mazda version of the feed.
That would be great. That would be super cool.
There's just like a 99% Invisible for Ben and other Mazda owners feed.
Well, I can say that people in Nissans have also reported having this problem. But yes, for Mazda owners and Nissan owners who are having problems with this specific infotainment system.
That's a very niche podcast.
So I called Ben up one more time. Just let me know if when you got it set up and ready to roll.
Will do.
This is 99% Invisible. I'm Roman Mars. Tim Harford is a master at picking out the perfect little story.
And everything's working fine?
Economic principle.
Yep. So this totally works. It's playing normally, not freezing at all. It's perfect.
So one thing I think that we fail to acknowledge is that they found out throughout all of these experiments, they found out that Ben, who was like the center of this whole thing, he was the reason why they were set to do all these experiments. They found out that Ben was not the only one, that the host of 99% Invisible he's heard from other people who own Mazdas and who have this Bluetooth stereo in their Mazda. He's heard the same complaint. And also some Nissan drivers as well. And so I think that should have been mentioned, that, that now there's this maybe small contingency of people that are kind of doing this. But what he wound up doing was almost creating like a private podcast for them in a way. And it was very satisfying at the end, I gotta say.
Yeah. And, as it's going through, they created a Mazda safe version of 99% Invisible. And the specificity of that makes it memorable, but also it's so niche that the audience feels rewarded and they feel like they actually were a part of the process. And they did the things that were required to get them there. Now, I will say, this podcast was really difficult for me to break down because there were so many different things happening. There were I think there was like 7 different podcasts created. And I wanted to get a clip of all the podcasts and, there was a lot happening. So I would recommend going and listening to this episode to hear all the different things that they went through, because it was engaging and it was interesting to listen to. It was just very hard to break down into
I have a
short
confession
clips.
to make. I have a
Yep.
confession. At one point, that they gave us the payoff, that they now know what it's about, and the host of the show created like a private podcast for all the Mazda owners. And then they said, we will, after this break, we'll return and let you listen to those podcasts. That's when I turned it off, because I had already heard little bits and pieces of
Yep.
those things building up to it. And I turned it off. I was just in it for the resolve of what the problem was. And so I didn't go past that.
Same
Yeah,
thing,
and-
DR. I did the exact
Yeah.
same thing, DR. When I heard that, I was like, okay, I'm escaping now, because I don't need to go
I'm
hear how
satisfied.
I don't need to hear how the sausage was made for me. I've got the resolution. Now, that said,
But
I think if I was really into the show and I was really into it, the way they structured that, I think, was probably better, because if they had put that in the actual episode, like more of it, I think I would have been frustrated even more, and I
Yeah.
would have bailed. I would have said, I'm done. I don't need to hear about this cooking show. I don't need to hear about this and that. So putting at the end, I think, was actually a really brilliant
Yeah.
move.
And they gave us a little taste. I mean, if they hadn't given us a little taste, maybe I would have wanted to hear exactly what it was going on. But they gave us a little taste during the whole thing of each one. And that was enough for me. It really was.
Yeah, it's like
And
they
they-
give you a little nub, and you're like,
Yeah.
I'll take the nub and I'll run with it. But the thing is, I would have said, though, Jonathan, and tell me if you agree with me or not. I might have said during the episode, hey, if you want to hear all of these, stay tuned to the end. I think they miss an opportunity there, because I think that might have been a brilliant move if they had said, like, hey, don't forget, at the end of the episode, we're going to play all of these that we created for you. I don't know, Jonathan, you might disagree with me, but I think
You
there was
know-
an opportunity there.
There was an opportunity there, and I know it said it in the show notes. So right at the top of the show notes, it mentioned that these were available, and if you wanted all of them, they were on the reply all feed. So they only included a couple of them on the end of this podcast, but if you wanted all 7 of them, those experimental ones were all on the reply all feed, and that was in the show notes, I believe. So
But
you did get that.
But who's going to look
mentioning
at
it in the
that?
episode.
But I'm just saying, if I'm listening to that, I mean, this is a whole argument we could have, right? We could take a half an hour and talk about show notes. But like, I wouldn't even have thought to look there. But if they had just said, hey, at the end of the episode, we're going to play some of these, because I was a little bit interested, but like DR, at this point, okay, I figured out the resolution. They didn't really solve the problem, because here's the funny thing, Jonathan. You don't have a clip about it, but at one point, I kind of felt like it was back to the whole tech support. Have you rebooted your machine? And they basically said to Ben,
Right.
dude, is there
Did you
a
update?
firmware upgrade
Yeah.
that you could get? And he's like, well, I don't want to spend the money on that. And I was like, okay, well, you know, as Roman Mars, I would have said, like, dude, go do your part. And it might sound mean, but it's like the first thing they tell you when you call tech support, have you rebooted your machine?
Yeah.
And I just felt like, oh man, this could have all been resolved. So now we're creating this big situation that probably something in the firmware to the radio, Mazda and Nissan have already fixed. But now we're going to go fix something that doesn't really need to be fixed, but it's frustrating to somebody, which it made for a good episode. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it's back to that thing of, can you restart your machine and then call back when you've restarted? And if it works, you don't have an issue.
And for those of you that are listening, it was the percentage sign, a space, and not just the letter I that followed it as in invisible, but the capital letter I, because they did an experiment with the percentage sign, space, and a small I, and it played just fine. But once they capitalized the I, whatever the word is that they used in their experiment, it did not work. And so that's how they found out exactly what was going on.
And I would have never had that problem because I don't capitalize letters. Little known fact about me. Ralph, does anybody else have anything they want to say? I have some
Janae, did I see
takeaways
you
from this
flash your
one.
microphone? Janae, did you want to make a comment? Maybe not. I thought I saw Janae flash his microphone. Maybe he did not, but I don't see anybody else, Jonathan, at this point.
All right. So I want to talk about some of the obsession engines that were in play in this episode and then give you a couple takeaways. But this episode basically runs on 3 obsession-worthy engines. At the same time, number one is curiosity. What is happening? Why is this happening? And the questions just keep piling up on each other, which leads to the next obsession engine, which is the escalation. Every answer creates a weirder problem. So you're curious about what's happening, and each time you're trying to get an answer, it's creating a weirder problem. So it builds this escalation in there. And what really drives it home is you're solving the mystery alongside them. You're yelling at the podcast saying, why don't you try this? How come you didn't try this? Ooh, this will make it easier. All of that is building that obsession worthiness. You are actually invested in this podcast now. You actually care about what happens. You may not listen to another episode, but in this podcast, you are truly invested. And I think those three are key parts of the entire episode and why it works so well.
And they used all three of those brilliantly because they frustrated me, they annoyed me, they created tension, and they made me hang in there even though I was so annoyed and frustrated and had tension that I wanted to hear how it ended. And then honestly, I was disappointed in the ending because I was like, duh, we could have done that from the start. Give him his own private feed and solve the problem, and you wouldn't have wasted a half an hour of my time. Sorry, but that's how I felt.
But there are more people that had the problem, and it wouldn't have created as good of an episode.
Absolutely true. No, Jonathan, I'm not disagreeing with you one iota, dude. Yeah. That is 100% true. But it did absolutely get me on board for the ride, the roller coaster of tension. And if that was the goal, well done.
Yeah. And I just want to point out, there were a couple of the, if you're really interested in the creativity of these guys, like a couple of the cooking podcast was really interesting. Listen to that one. And then there was another one where they interviewed the woman who is the host of Serial. Mm-hmm. And she had this really interesting, like it was all over the place because it was about parentheticals, because they were testing if the parentheses actually impacted it. But it was a really interesting one. So if you haven't, I would say are worth listening to. They were really interesting.
You know, how they got those people to help in their experiment was amazing, because these are kind of famous people in their own circles. You know, I was very surprised to hear some of the voices on there that they would participate in this.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
More
DR. And unfortunately, I didn't know who they were, but I knew, these must be some important people, although I didn't know who they were. So so if I'm a new listener, Jonathan, let me ask this question. Should they have introduced these people a little bit more? Like, I heard of Serial before, so when they said the lady from Serial, and I could tell this was a big deal because the other host was like, oh, I can't believe you got such and such. But for somebody who didn't know those people, there was still a little bit of a disconnect for me, because I was like, okay, that's great, but Ann, what's your point? Should they have said, and this person does this, this, and this, or would that have been too much of a sidetrack?
I knew who the cooking lady was because I saw her series on Netflix.
Yeah, it's hard because there was so much happening in this episode that it might have been too much, because they were going from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And in order to keep it moving, like they said, they only played parts of the podcast within the episode. And that was still a lot. There was a lot happening. So I think that, yes, if we're taking away something from this, we should make sure that our audience knows the people that we're talking to and how they're involved in the entire thing. Because even the guy that actually helped find the solution was an important person at one of the podcast networks, which nobody really would have known unless you're behind the scenes on that stuff.
He's a big deal behind the scenes.
Yeah. And Jonathan, let me ask you a question then. Does that create an opportunity for all of us as well? Is there an opportunity for us to reach out to some of these big name folks and say, hey, I've got an idea. I'm just interested in, would they say, hey, well, that's a really good idea. I would love to do a crossover with you. It may just be a strategic, opportunity, because my suspicion is these folks who have these teams and all that, they're still looking for interesting ideas. They're still looking for creative ideas. And I think it's sometimes we feel like we can't reach out and reach to those people and say, hey, would you consider this? What do you think of that, Jonathan? Do you think that's a viable opportunity for people?
So I think if you're looking for collaborations, I would look within your niche and within the adjacent niches of the people that are kind of at your level. There's no harm in stretching a little bit. There's no harm in reaching for that one person. But if you really want to be tactical about it, keep it within your niche or an adjacent niche, somebody that can deliver value for your audience. And, if you want to reach, make sure it still makes sense for you and them, because a really good collaboration benefits both people equally.
I got the impression, and this was not at all said or depicted in the episode whatsoever, but I got it on the inner, I felt it, that maybe these people who were doing these experiments, maybe they had a relationship with these people, like a prior relationship. Maybe they had been on one of the episodes of Reply to All or something like that. And so they had this kind of maybe a little touch point with these people beforehand. And so maybe that's why they could go to them.
Were they all in the same network, Jonathan? Is there like a network here that I don't know about, or these people are kind of all in the same circle?
They're separate networks, but they're all kind of on that upper echelon of podcast level. The obsession-worthy podcasts that you're going to see, they're all kind of in that playing field. So I think they were, looking for people that were in their network that they could really collaborate with. And all of them would have benefited, because the audience from Serial, the audience from the cooking program, they're all going to tune into that podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then they can use it on their own podcast. So that's going to help. That's why collaboration and why I wanted to make sure that I had this collaborative podcast episode, because that makes it obsession worthy. That gets a whole lot of people invested in it.
And I think that's a good point too. Even in the business world, we try to look for win-win-win opportunities. And I think so many people approach people with, well, I've got an idea for you, because you're only thinking about what it's going to do for you. But if you can somehow frame this in a way that it benefits everybody. I know when I work with doing interviews like on Podmatch or something like that, when I send out hey, here's what I can do for you, here's what it will do for me, here's what it'll do for your audience, I just think there's a strategy there that we all should employ, because it's super simple to throw it out there and say, hey, I want to be on your show because of X, Y, and Z. If I'm the receiver of that, okay, that's nice, Ralph. You want to come on my show so that you can steal some of my audience, but what's in it for me? Well, if I can put that in the tender offer at the front end, here's what it's in it for you, here's what it brings to your audience, that is a collaboration on, superpower, because you've built those wins into it. And I think that's where you were going with that, right, Jonathan?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's really important that you do that. And I'll tell you, when people pitch me on Podmatch and they just talk about themselves, I don't care. I ignore them right away. I get so many requests. Sorry. So.
And that's kind of the conversation, Jonathan, that you and I had, because I was on your show. And when I reached out to Jonathan, I said, here's what I can do for your audience. And Jonathan got back to me really quickly, because I think Jonathan said, oh, that's a really good point. It's not something I normally do, but here's what value you can bring my audience.
Absolutely. And it got you exposure to my audience. And, potentially, we don't know yet, potentially some clients and possibilities from that. And it helped my audience actually understand things like what they should do with their money. So that's a great example of it. I want to check to see if anybody else has anything. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think a bigger example of you sharing, like this podcast morning show does exactly that. We're constantly collaborating. We're constantly bringing people from other areas of the world. Like each one of us has a podcast, and we're coming here together. And when people listening to the episode and they listen to our voices, they're like, oh, he has a podcast. Oh, let me go check that out. So we're kind of already doing a crossover show, if you think about it.
Absolutely. I think this is a great example of a crossover show and a collaborative show, because we all do have our own things that we're doing and our own specialties that we bring to the podcast.
Which actually, Junaid, I think we should talk about that for just a second. this is a great opportunity to say to everyone that joins us here, talk to your friends about the show. Talk to your other people in your circles about what we do here every morning, because those are the people that will grow one by one to bring us a bigger audience here. So that is a brilliant observation, Junaid. And it's an opportunity for all of us to say, hey, we do this show in the morning. You should really come and talk about what you do. They can join in the chat. We make it super simple for them to get involved. So I just think there's a collaborative opportunity there, Junaid. And thank you so much for bringing that to everybody's attention.
Of course, that's what we do.
Jonathan, did you have anything to summarize here before we call
I
it
do.
a day here?
I do have a couple takeaways and a final thought, but I just want to make sure if there's anybody else that has anything they want to share, that they get an opportunity to do that. Because I could talk all day on this stuff. I love storytelling.
It looks like we're good,
right.
Jonathan. So why don't you bring it home for us, my friend?
So the first takeaway is that tiny, weird problems are really powerful. You don't need to have these huge stakes in your podcast. Just like I was mentioning to DR when I was saying how she could build a story around a problem that a client has in her business client podcast. That didn't come out right, but she knows what I mean. What you need is specificity, like a real problem that you're very specific about, a little bit of mystery and tension in it. You need the escalation, and then a process that you bring them through. That will create the emotional participation. And I promise you that your tiny, weird stories are, especially if they're specific, they're going to outperform this giant idea that's generic and everybody else touches on, because you have this unique perspective on it. So don't shy away from the tiny, weird problems. They do make engaging podcasts. And then my other takeaway is make sure your audience experiences the discovery with you. Don't summarize the journey. Bring the audience into the journey. Let them hear the confusion, experience the failures, and that's a hard one for people. I get it. But letting people see the failure helps people connect with you as a human and connect with the podcast as something they can trust. Follow through the experiments and uncover the answers alongside your audience, because that creates investment and that creates that trust that you're looking to create. And then final thought, the Roman Mars Mazda Virus, it proves that obsession-worthy storytelling is not about the topic size. It's about making the audience need the answer, because once you hear it, you can't, your brain understands just differently. It's not a podcast is breaking Mazdas. It's, holy crap, this is something that means something to people. And your brain just gets it and connects. And that makes a podcast entertaining, engaging, and obsession worthy.
Well said, Jonathan. Well said. All right, my friends. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be back again tomorrow. Like I said, we've got a special guest tomorrow, Cindy Harrison, who is a publicist. So make sure you join us on tomorrow's show. And everybody else, have a great day today. Thank you. Great